The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone corridors of Windsor Castle as Prince William walked slowly toward his father's study. His footsteps echoed in the silence, each step heavier than the last. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on his shoulders like a lead blanket. For months, he had kept his thoughts to himself, watching from the sidelines as his family dealt with the ongoing challenges that seemed to follow them everywhere. William paused outside the oak door of his father's private office. Through the thick wood, he could hear the muffled sound of Charles speaking on the phone, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority mixed with weariness. The prince took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind countless times, but now that the moment had arrived, his carefully planned words seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. The relationship between his father and stepmother had always been a delicate subject within the family. Camilla had been part of their lives for years now, but William had never fully embraced her presence the way others had hoped. There were too many memories, too much history, and too many unresolved feelings that made it difficult for him to accept her completely. His mother's memory still lived strongly in his heart, and sometimes it felt like accepting Camilla meant betraying that sacred bond. William knocked gently on the door, hearing his father's voice call out for him to enter. Charles looked up from his desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, surrounded by stacks of official documents and correspondence. The morning light streaming through the tall windows highlighted the silver in his hair and the lines that had deepened around his eyes over the years. "William, good morning," Charles said, setting down his pen and giving his son his full attention. "You look rather serious today. Is everything all right?" The younger prince closed the door behind him and moved to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his father's desk. He could feel his heart beating faster, knowing that once he spoke his mind, there would be no taking back his words. The family had already faced so much scrutiny from the public and the press, and he knew that his feelings about Camilla could create even more complications. "Father, I need to speak with you about something important," William began, his voice steady despite the nervousness he felt inside. "It's about Camilla, and I think it's time I was completely honest about my feelings." Charles leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more guarded. He had sensed for some time that his eldest son harbored reservations about his wife, but they had never addressed it directly. The king had hoped that with time, William would come to accept and appreciate Camilla as he had. But looking at his son's serious expression, it was clear that time alone had not been enough to heal whatever wounds remained. "I see," Charles said quietly. "Please go on." William took another deep breath, gathering his courage. "I've tried, Father. I really have tried to accept her, to welcome her into our family the way you wanted. But I can't continue to pretend that everything is fine when it isn't. Every time I see her at family gatherings, every time she speaks about royal duties or the future of the monarchy, I feel like she's trying to fill a space that should never be filled." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken tension. Charles felt a pain in his chest as he listened to his son express feelings that he had feared but hoped would eventually fade. He loved Camilla deeply and had fought hard for their relationship to be accepted by both the family and the public. Hearing William's honest assessment felt like a punch to the gut. "Your mother," William continued, his voice becoming softer, "will always be irreplaceable to me. I know you've moved on, and I understand that you deserve happiness. But I can't shake the feeling that having Camilla so prominently involved in royal affairs somehow diminishes what mother meant to our family and to the people." Charles removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of his son's words. He had known this conversation would come eventually, but he had hoped it would be different. He had hoped that William would have found a way to separate his loyalty to his mother's memory from his relationship with Camilla. But, clearly, that separation had not happened. "William," Charles began carefully, "I understand your feelings, and I respect your loyalty to your mother's memory. Diana will always hold a special place in our hearts and in the history of this family. But you must understand that Camilla is my wife now. She has stood by me through some of the most difficult times of my life, and she has earned her place in this family through her dedication and service." William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had expected his father to defend Camilla, but hearing it still stung. "I'm not questioning her dedication, Father, but the people still remember Mother. They still love her, and when they see Camilla taking on roles that Mother once held, it creates confusion and resentment. I see it in their faces at public events. I hear it in the way they talk about our family. The conversation was becoming more heated than either of them had anticipated. Charles felt his defensive instincts kicking in, wanting to protect both his wife and his own choices. But he also felt a deep sadness that his son was struggling with something that brought Charles so much personal happiness. The public's opinion is important, Charles acknowledged, but we cannot base our personal relationships entirely on what others think. The monarchy has survived many challenges over the centuries by adapting and evolving. Camilla has proven herself to be an asset to the crown, regardless of what some people might prefer to believe. William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where he had played as a child with his mother and brother. Those memories felt so vivid and precious, and the thought of them being overshadowed or forgotten troubled him deeply. "It's not just about public opinion, Father," William said, his back still turned. "It's about what feels right to me as your son and as someone who will one day lead this monarchy. I worry that we're asking people to accept something that feels forced, something that doesn't honor the natural flow of our family's history." Charles joined his son at the window, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but William tensed slightly at the touch. The physical distance between them seemed to mirror the emotional distance that this conversation was revealing. "Son, I know this is difficult," Charles said softly, "but I need you to understand that my marriage to Camilla was not a betrayal of your mother or of our family's history. It was a choice made by a man who had found love again after years of loneliness and struggle. Camilla has never tried to replace your mother. She knows that's impossible." William turned to face his father, his eyes reflecting a mix of pain and frustration. "But don't you see, Father? Whether she intends to or not, that's exactly what's happening. Every time she appears at a state dinner or represents the family at an important event, people compare her to Mother. And in those comparisons, Mother's legacy gets diminished." The two men stood facing each other, representing different perspectives on a situation that had no easy solutions. Charles saw his son's pain, but also felt the need to protect his wife and validate his own choices. William saw his father's happiness, but couldn't reconcile it with his own sense of loyalty and duty to his mother's memory. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," William continued, "and I believe it would be better for everyone if Camilla took a step back from some of her more prominent royal duties. Let her support you privately. Let her be your wife. But perhaps it's time to reconsider how publicly involved she is in representing our family." Charles felt a flash of anger at his son's suggestion. The idea that Camilla should diminish her role to accommodate William's discomfort seemed unfair and unrealistic. But he also recognized that this conversation represented a crucial moment in their relationship as father and son, and he needed to handle it carefully. "William, what you're suggesting would be a significant change that would affect not just Camilla, but our entire approach to royal duties and public representation. It's not a decision that can be made lightly or based solely on personal feelings." The prince nodded, understanding the complexity of what he was asking. "I know it's complicated, Father, but I also know that the strength of our monarchy depends on the unity of our family. Right now, that unity is strained, at least for me. And if I'm struggling with this, I imagine Harry has similar feelings, even if he's chosen to distance himself from the family entirely." The mention of Harry brought another layer of pain to the conversation. Charles's relationship with his younger son had become complicated and distant, and the thought that his marriage to Camilla might have contributed to that estrangement was troubling. "Your brother's situation is complex and involves many factors," Charles said carefully. "But you're here, William. You're part of this family and this institution. We need to find a way to move forward that honors everyone's feelings and needs." William returned to his chair, feeling emotionally drained from the intensity of their exchange. He had said what he needed to say, but he wasn't sure if his father truly understood the depth of his concerns. The conversation had revealed a fundamental difference in how they viewed the family's future and Camilla's role in it. "I don't expect you to make any immediate decisions," William said finally. "But I needed you to know how I feel. I've tried to keep these thoughts to myself, but they've been eating away at me. As someone who will one day be responsible for this monarchy, I feel I have a duty to speak honestly about what I believe is best for our family and our people." Charles sat down heavily in his chair, feeling older than his years. The conversation had been more difficult than he had anticipated, and he could see that there were no easy answers. His son's concerns were heartfelt and genuine, but they also challenged everything Charles had built in his personal life over the past several years. "I appreciate your honesty," William, Charles said, his voice tired. And I understand that this comes from a place of love and concern for our family. But I also need you to understand that Camilla is not going anywhere. She is my wife, and she has earned her place in this family through years of service and dedication. The two men sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. The morning sun had shifted, casting new shadows across the room and highlighting the tension that existed between them. William knew that he had opened a door that could not be easily closed, and Charles knew that he faced a challenge that would require careful consideration and delicate handling. "What happens next, father?" William asked quietly. Charles looked at his son, seeing both the young boy who had once followed him around the palace grounds and the mature man who would one day wear the crown. The weight of leadership was already visible in William's bearing, and Charles recognized that his son's concerns came from a genuine desire to serve the monarchy well. "I need time to think about everything you've said," Charles replied. "This conversation has given me much to consider, and I want to discuss it with Camilla as well. She deserves to know about your concerns, and she deserves the opportunity to respond to them." William nodded, though the thought of his stepmother knowing about his feelings made him uncomfortable. He had hoped to keep the conversation between him and his father, but he understood that in a marriage, such secrets were neither fair nor sustainable. "I hope you'll also consider the broader implications," William added. "This isn't just about my personal feelings. It's about the future of the monarchy and how the people perceive our family. We have a responsibility to serve them well, and that sometimes means making difficult personal sacrifices." As William prepared to leave his father's study, both men knew that their relationship had shifted in some fundamental way. The conversation had brought long-buried tensions to the surface, and there was no returning to the careful politeness that had characterized their previous interactions about Camilla. Charles watched his son walk toward the door, feeling a profound sadness about the divisions within his family. He had hoped that time would heal all wounds and bring everyone together, but it was clear that some issues ran deeper than he had realized. The conversation with William had forced him to confront the reality that his personal happiness might come at the cost of family harmony. "William," Charles called out just as his son reached the door. The prince turned back, his hand still on the door handle. "I want you to know that I love you, and I value your perspective, even when it's difficult to hear. We'll find a way through this together, as a family." William's expression softened slightly. "I love you too, father. That's why this conversation was so important to me. I want what's best for you, for our family, and for the people we serve." After William left, Charles sat alone in his study, staring out the window at the grounds where his sons had once played. The conversation had forced him to confront questions he had been avoiding, and he knew that the decisions he made in the coming days would have far-reaching consequences for everyone he loved. The morning that had begun with routine paperwork and administrative tasks had become a turning point that would reshape the dynamics of the royal family. Charles knew that his next moves would be crucial, not just for his relationship with William, but for the future of the monarchy itself. That evening, Charles found himself pacing the private quarters he shared with Camilla, his mind replaying every word of his conversation with William. The ornate furnishings and familiar surroundings that usually brought him comfort now felt heavy with the weight of the decision he faced. Camilla sat quietly in her favorite armchair, a book forgotten in her lap, watching her husband with growing concern. She had known something was troubling him from the moment he entered their sitting room. After years of marriage, she could read his moods and expressions with remarkable accuracy. The way he moved, the tension in his shoulders, and the distant look in his eyes all told her that something significant had happened during his day. "Darling, you've been pacing for nearly an hour," Camilla said gently. "Please, come sit with me and tell me what's wrong." Charles stopped his restless movement and looked at his wife, seeing the worry etched in her features. She had been through so much criticism and scrutiny over the years, always handling it with grace and dignity. The thought of adding to her burdens with the news of William's concerns filled him with reluctance and guilt. "It's William," Charles said finally, settling into the chair across from her. "We had a conversation today that I've been dreading for years." Camilla set her book aside completely, giving her husband her full attention. She had always been aware that William harbored reservations about her role in the family, though they had maintained a cordial relationship in public and during family gatherings. She had hoped that time and patience would eventually win him over, but she had also prepared herself for the possibility that complete acceptance might never come. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety she felt growing in her chest. Charles recounted the conversation in detail, watching as various emotions played across Camilla's face. He saw hurt, understanding, resignation, and perhaps a touch of relief that the unspoken tensions had finally been brought into the open. When he finished, they sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the implications of William's words. "I can't say I'm entirely surprised," Camilla said eventually. "I've always sensed his discomfort, though he's been careful never to let it show publicly. Diana will always be his mother, and I've never expected or wanted to replace her in his heart." Charles reached across and took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers had become. "But William is suggesting that you step back from your royal duties, that you become less visible in your role. That's not fair to you. And it's not fair to the work you've done to establish yourself as a valuable member of the royal family." Camilla squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his support while also recognizing the impossible position they were all in. "Charles, I need you to understand something important. My happiness doesn't depend on titles or public recognition. It comes from being your wife and supporting you in whatever way I can. If stepping back would help heal the divisions in your family, then perhaps it's worth considering." The king felt a surge of love and admiration for his wife's selflessness, but also a fierce protectiveness. She had endured years of public criticism and personal attacks, slowly building her reputation through hard work and genuine dedication to charitable causes. The idea of asking her to diminish that work because of family tensions seemed profoundly unfair. "No," Charles said firmly. "I won't ask you to sacrifice everything you've built. You've earned your place through your own efforts, not because you're my wife. The people who work with you, the charities you support, the causes you champion, they all depend on your continued involvement." Camilla appreciated his defense of her work, but she also understood the complexity of the situation in ways that perhaps Charles couldn't fully grasp. As someone who had been an outsider for so long, she had developed a keen awareness of family dynamics and the importance of maintaining unity, especially in a family as scrutinized as the royals. "But what about William?" she asked. "He's going to be king one day. His opinion matters, not just as your son, but as the future head of the monarchy. If he truly believes that my prominent role is damaging to the institution, then we need to take that seriously." Charles stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. The conversation with William had forced him to confront a fundamental truth. Leadership sometimes required making choices between personal desires and institutional needs. As king, he had a responsibility to consider the long-term health of the monarchy, even when it conflicted with his personal happiness. "There has to be another way," he said, more to himself than to Camilla. "Some compromise that honors both your contributions and William's concerns." Camilla joined him at the window, slipping her arm through his. "Perhaps there is, but it will require all of us to be flexible and willing to make sacrifices. The question is whether William would be open to finding a middle ground, or if he truly believes the only solution is for me to step back completely." They stood together in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about possible solutions. The situation was complicated by the public nature of their lives, where every decision would be scrutinized and analyzed by the media and the people. Any changes to Camilla's role would need to be handled carefully to avoid creating more controversy or speculation about family divisions. "I think I need to speak with William again," Charles said eventually. "But first, I want to understand exactly what he envisions. Does he want you to give up all your patronages? Should you stop attending state functions? Where exactly does he draw the line between acceptable and unacceptable involvement?" Camilla nodded, understanding the importance of getting clarity about William's specific concerns. "And I think I should speak with him as well. This situation affects me directly, and I deserve the opportunity to understand his perspective and perhaps share my own." The suggestion made Charles uncomfortable. He worried that a direct conversation between William and Camilla might escalate tensions rather than resolve them. But he also recognized that avoiding difficult conversations had contributed to the current situation, and perhaps it was time for everyone to be more direct and honest with each other. "Are you sure you want to put yourself through that?" Charles asked. "It might not be an easy conversation." Camilla smiled sadly. "Darling, I've been through much worse than a difficult conversation with your son. If there's any chance that talking directly might help him understand my position and help me understand his, then it's worth the risk." Over the following days, Charles found himself analyzing every aspect of the situation from multiple angles. He consulted with his closest advisors, though he was careful not to reveal the family tensions that had prompted his questions. He asked hypothetical questions about royal roles and responsibilities, trying to understand the potential implications of any changes to Camilla's duties. Meanwhile, Camilla continued her scheduled engagements while privately preparing for what she knew would be one of the most important conversations of her royal life. She had always known that her position in the family was somewhat precarious, dependent not just on her relationship with Charles, but also on the acceptance of his children and the broader royal family. The opportunity for a private conversation between Camilla and William came during a family gathering at Balmoral. The Scottish castle had always been a place where the royal family could relax and speak more freely, away from the formal protocols of London. Charles had arranged for some private time for each of them to have individual conversations with William, hoping that the more relaxed atmosphere might facilitate honest dialogue. William arrived at Balmoral with a sense of apprehension, knowing that his conversation with his father had set events in motion that couldn't be undone. He had spent the intervening days thinking about his words and wondering if he had been too harsh or inflexible in his position. But he also remained convinced that his concerns were valid and important for the future of the monarchy. Camilla approached the conversation with William with careful preparation, but also with genuine openness. She had thought extensively about what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it, but she also knew that the most important part would be listening to William's perspective and truly understanding his concerns. They met in the morning room, a bright space that looked out over the Scottish hills. The informal setting helped ease some of the tension, though both of them felt the weight of the conversation they were about to have. William had always been polite to Camilla in their previous interactions, but there had always been an underlying distance that they had both acknowledged but never directly addressed. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Camilla began, settling into a comfortable chair across from William. "I know this situation is difficult for everyone, and I appreciate your willingness to have this conversation." William nodded, studying his stepmother's face and trying to read her intentions. "Father told you about our discussion?" "Yes, he did. And I want you to know that I understand your concerns, even if I don't necessarily agree with all of them. Your mother was an extraordinary woman who meant a great deal to many people, including me." The mention of his mother caught William off guard. He had expected Camilla to focus on defending her own position, not to acknowledge Diana's legacy so directly. It was a gesture that showed both courage and sensitivity, and it made him more willing to engage in genuine dialogue. "She was," William said simply. "And sometimes I feel like the world is forgetting that, or worse, that her memory is being overshadowed by other narratives." Camilla leaned forward slightly, her expression sincere. "William, I want you to know that I have never, not for a single moment, tried to replace your mother or diminish her memory. I know that's impossible, and I wouldn't want to even if I could. What I have tried to do is support your father and serve the monarchy to the best of my ability." William appreciated her directness, though it didn't immediately resolve his concerns. "I believe that you don't intend to overshadow her memory. But intention and impact aren't always the same thing. When people see you in roles that she once held, when they compare your approaches to hers, it inevitably affects how they remember her." It was a fair point, and Camilla acknowledged it with a nod. "You're right that comparisons are inevitable. But, William, would you prefer that your father had remained alone? That he had never found happiness again after losing your mother?" The question struck at the heart of William's internal conflict. As much as he struggled with his father's remarriage, he also wanted his father to be happy. He had seen Charles during his loneliest years, and he understood that Camilla had brought joy and stability to his life. "Of course I want father to be happy," William said. "But there's a difference between private happiness and public representation. You can be his wife and his companion without necessarily taking on such a prominent role in royal duties." Camilla considered his words carefully. "And if I were to step back from some of my public roles, would that address your concerns? Or would my very presence as your father's wife continue to be problematic?" The question forced William to examine his own feelings more deeply. Was his issue truly with Camilla's public role, or was it with her presence in the family at all? He realized that he hadn't fully sorted out his own emotions, and that perhaps his concerns were more complex than he had initially acknowledged. "I think it would help," he said slowly, "if you focused more on supporting father privately and perhaps took on fewer high-profile public engagements. It might allow people to remember mother without constant comparisons." Camilla nodded thoughtfully. "That's something I could consider. My primary goal has always been to support your father, And if I can do that more effectively by being less visible publicly, then perhaps that's worth exploring. William felt surprised by her willingness to consider his suggestions. He had expected more resistance, more defensiveness about her established role. Her openness made him want to be equally open about his own struggles and concerns. "I want to be fair to you," William said. "You've been kind to me and to my family, and I know you care about Father. This isn't about you personally. It's about what I believe is best for the monarchy and for preserving the memory of the people who came before us." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with both of them exploring different aspects of the situation and potential solutions. By the end, they hadn't solved all the problems, but they had achieved something equally important: a genuine understanding of each other's perspectives and a mutual respect for each other's concerns. When Charles joined them later, he could see that something had shifted in the dynamic between his wife and his son. There was still tension, but there was also a new foundation of honest communication that hadn't existed before. "We've had a good conversation," Camilla told her husband. "William has helped me understand his concerns more clearly, and I think we may have found some areas where compromise is possible." Charles felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He was glad that they had been able to talk openly, but he also worried about what compromises might be necessary and what they would mean for all of their futures. The conversation had been a crucial first step, but he knew that the most difficult decisions still lay ahead. The weeks following the conversations at Balmoral were filled with careful consideration and quiet consultations. Charles found himself in an unprecedented position, needing to balance his role as a husband with his responsibilities as a father and as king. The decision he was contemplating would affect not only his immediate family, but also the institution of the monarchy and the public's perception of the royal family. In the privacy of his study, Charles began working on what would become one of the most significant decisions of his reign. He spent hours reviewing precedents, studying constitutional law, and consulting with his most trusted advisors. The situation was delicate because it involved personal relationships, but had far-reaching public implications. Sir Edward Whitman, Charles's private secretary and one of his most trusted advisors, had been quietly researching similar situations in royal history. The meetings between the king and his private secretary became more frequent and more intense as they explored various options and their potential consequences. "Your Majesty," Sir Edward said during one of their private meetings, "I've reviewed the historical precedents, and while there are few exact parallels, there are some examples of royal spouses adjusting their public roles for various reasons." Charles looked up from the documents spread across his desk. "And what were the outcomes in those cases?" "Mixed, I'm afraid," Sir Edward replied honestly. "In some instances, the adjustments were seen as wise and necessary. In others, they were perceived as weakness or capitulation to pressure. Much depends on how such changes are presented to the public and the reasoning behind them." The king rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision he faced. "The challenge is that we're dealing with deeply personal family matters that have very public implications. Whatever we decide will be scrutinized and interpreted in ways we may not be able to control." Meanwhile, Camilla had been quietly preparing for the possibility that her role might change significantly. She met privately with the heads of the various charities and organizations she supported, wanting to ensure that any transition would be as smooth as possible for the people who depended on her involvement. Lady Margaret Thornbury, who had been Camilla's closest advisor for years, watched with admiration as her employer handled the uncertainty with characteristic grace. "Ma'am, if I may say so, the way you're approaching this situation shows tremendous strength and wisdom." Camilla smiled sadly as she reviewed the list of her royal patronages. "Margaret, I've learned over the years that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back rather than fight. If my stepping back can help heal the divisions in this family, then perhaps it's the right thing to do." But the decision was not just about Camilla's willingness to make sacrifices. It was also about Charles's ability to make a choice that might be seen as prioritizing family harmony over institutional stability. Some of his advisors worried that yielding to pressure from William could set a dangerous precedent for future family disagreements. Lord Pemberton, one of Charles's senior advisors, expressed these concerns during a particularly tense meeting. "Your Majesty, with respect, we must consider the broader implications. If you make significant changes to the Queen Consort's role based on family pressure, it could be seen as a sign that the monarchy is unstable or that decisions are being made based on personal preferences rather than institutional needs." Charles listened carefully to these concerns, understanding their validity. But he also understood something that his advisors might not fully grasp. The strength of the monarchy depended not just on maintaining traditions, but on the unity and stability of the royal family itself. A divided family could not effectively serve the people or represent the institution. Lord Pemberton, I appreciate your concerns, Charles replied. But we must also consider that a monarchy that cannot adapt to changing circumstances, including family dynamics, may not survive in the long term. Sometimes wisdom lies in knowing when to hold firm and when to bend. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Some members of the royal household were concerned about the practical implications of reducing Camilla's role, while others worried about the public reaction to such changes. The media had begun to notice subtle shifts in the royal family's public appearances, and speculation was growing about potential changes within the household. William, meanwhile,
You must
was
understand the
dealing with
gravity
his
of this
own
situation.
conflicted
I do,
feelings
but we
about
must
the
consider the
situation he had set in
consequences.
motion.
There is no other
While
way.
he remained convinced that his concerns were valid, he was beginning to understand the broader implications of the changes he had requested. The weight of potentially affecting his stepmother's life and work was not lost on him. During a private walk through the gardens at Kensington Palace, William confided in his wife Catherine about the ongoing situation. Catherine had always maintained a carefully neutral position regarding Camilla, treating her with respect while also honoring Diana's memory. Her perspective was valuable because she understood both the personal dynamics and the public implications. I keep wondering if I've done the right thing, William told her as they walked among the roses that Diana had once loved. I wanted to be honest about my feelings, but I didn't fully consider how much it would affect everyone else. Catherine took his arm gently. William, you spoke from your heart about something that was troubling you. That took courage. But now you need to consider whether you're willing to accept the compromises that might be necessary to move forward. Her words made William realize that he needed to think beyond his initial concerns and consider what kind of solution would actually work for everyone involved. He had asked for changes, but he hadn't fully considered what those changes would mean in practical terms or how they would affect the people he cared about. The turning point came during an unexpected encounter between William and Camilla at a charity event they were both attending. It was one of Camilla's long-standing patronages, an organization that supported victims of domestic violence. William had been invited to attend because of his own charitable work, not knowing that Camilla would be there. Watching Camilla interact with the women at the shelter, William saw something that gave him pause. She was not performing for cameras or trying to create a public relations moment. She was genuinely engaged with the women, listening to their stories with real compassion and offering support that was both practical and heartfelt. One woman, Sarah, had been staying at the shelter with her 2 young children after escaping an abusive relationship. She spoke to Camilla about her fears and hopes for the future, and Camilla responded not as a royal figure, but as a woman who understood something about facing public criticism and personal challenges. Your Majesty, Sarah said, I used to read all the terrible things they wrote about you in the newspapers. But seeing you here, seeing how much you care about us, I understand that the newspapers don't tell the whole story. Camilla took Sarah's hand gently. My dear, we all have the right to define ourselves by our actions rather than other people's opinions. You're showing tremendous courage by building a new life for yourself and your children. That's what matters. William watched this interaction from across the room, feeling a shift in his understanding of his stepmother's role and impact. This was not about replacing his mother or competing with her memory. This was about a woman who had found her own way to serve and support people who needed help. After the event, William approached Camilla as they were both preparing to leave. That was remarkable, he said simply. The work you're doing here is really making a difference. Camilla looked surprised but pleased by his acknowledgement. Thank you, William. This organization has been important to me for many years. The women here have taught me as much as I've been able to give them. As they walked to their cars, William found himself asking questions about the charity's work and Camilla's long-term involvement with it. For the first time, he was seeing her royal duties not as an intrusion on his mother's legacy, but as genuine service to people who needed help. If you were to step back from some of your public roles, William said carefully, what would happen to organizations like this one? Camilla considered the question seriously. Some would manage fine with other royal patrons or with increased private funding. But others, especially the smaller organizations that deal with difficult issues, might struggle. Having royal patronage opens doors and brings attention to causes that might otherwise be overlooked. William felt the complexity of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. He was beginning to understand that his initial request for Camilla to step back was not as simple as he had thought. Real people and important causes would be affected by any changes to her role. That evening, William requested another private meeting with his father. This time, however, he came not with demands or ultimatums, but with questions and a willingness to explore more nuanced solutions. "Father," William began, "I think I need to reconsider some of my earlier positions. Today I saw Camilla in a different light, and I'm starting to understand the complexity of what I was asking for." Charles looked at his son with a mixture of hope and caution. "What changed your mind?" William described his observations at the charity event and his growing awareness of the practical implications of reducing Camilla's role. "I still have concerns about public perception and Mother's legacy," he said. "But I'm beginning to think that perhaps there are other ways to address those concerns without asking Camilla to sacrifice work that is genuinely important." This conversation marked the beginning of a new phase in their discussions. Instead of focusing on whether Camilla should step back, they began exploring how the family could address public concerns while preserving the important work that Camilla was doing. "What if we focused on clarifying roles and expectations rather than reducing them?" Charles suggested. "Perhaps the issue isn't that Camilla is too visible, but that we haven't done enough to help people understand her unique contributions." William nodded thoughtfully. "And perhaps we could do more to actively honor Mother's memory in ways that complement rather than compete with Camilla's work." The shift in William's thinking was gradual but significant. He was moving from a position of opposition to one of problem-solving, looking for ways to address his concerns while also respecting the work and contributions that Camilla had made to the royal family. But even as William's perspective evolved, Charles knew that he still faced a crucial decision about how to move forward. The conversations had revealed the depth of the family's internal tensions, but they had also shown the possibility of finding solutions that could work for everyone involved. The next step would require Charles to make a choice that would define not only his relationship with his family, but also his approach to leadership as king. The decision would need to be announced publicly, and it would be scrutinized by the media and the people. Whatever he decided, it would become part of the permanent record of his reign. As Charles prepared to make his decision, he reflected on the lessons he had learned from the conversations with both William and Camilla. The situation had shown him that effective leadership sometimes required making difficult choices between competing values and interests. It had also shown him the importance of honest communication and the willingness to consider multiple perspectives before making final decisions. The king knew that his next move would surprise everyone, including his own family. But he also knew that it was the right decision for this moment in their history and for the future of the monarchy they all served. Charles spent the following week in an almost meditative state of consideration, weighing every aspect of the decision that lay before him. His choice would need to address the concerns that William had raised while also honoring Camilla's contributions and maintaining the dignity of the monarchy. But as he reflected on all the conversations and considerations, an unexpected solution began to take shape in his mind. The idea that emerged was radical in its simplicity and surprising in its scope. Rather than asking Camilla to step back, Charles began to envision a restructuring of royal roles that would address William's concerns while actually enhancing the effectiveness of the royal family's public service. It was a solution that would require unprecedented innovation within the traditional framework of the monarchy. On a crisp autumn morning, Charles called both William and Camilla to a private meeting in the blue drawing room at Buckingham Palace. The formal setting was intentional. He wanted them to understand that what he was about to propose was not just a family decision, but a constitutional and institutional one that would have lasting implications. When William and Camilla arrived, they could immediately sense that something significant was about to happen. Charles's demeanor was serious but confident, and there was an energy in his bearing that suggested he had reached a decision that satisfied him completely. "Thank you both for coming," Charles began, gesturing for them to sit in the chairs he had arranged facing each other with his own chair position between them. "I've spent considerable time thinking about our recent conversations and the concerns that have been raised. I believe I've found a solution that addresses everyone's needs while also strengthening our family and our service to the people." William and Camilla exchanged glances, both curious and slightly apprehensive about what Charles might propose. They had both been expecting some kind of compromise regarding Camilla's role, but Charles's confident tone suggested something more comprehensive than simple adjustments. The solution I'm proposing, Charles continued, involves creating a new framework for how we approach royal duties and public service. Instead of reducing anyone's role, we're going to enhance and clarify everyone's contributions in a way that honors both the past and the future. He stood and moved to an easel that had been covered with a cloth. Pulling away the covering, he revealed a detailed organizational chart that showed a restructured approach to royal responsibilities. The chart was unlike anything they had seen before, showing clear divisions of focus areas while maintaining coordination and mutual support. "William," Charles said, looking at his son, "your concerns about preserving your mother's legacy are valid and important. But instead of asking Camilla to step back, we're going to create a formal structure that explicitly honors Diana's memory while allowing all of us to contribute our unique strengths to serving the people." William studied the chart, seeing his own name associated with areas like mental health, homelessness, and emergency services, causes that had been important to his mother but also reflected his own passions and interests. "Father, what exactly are you proposing?" Charles smiled, seeing that his son was beginning to understand the scope of his vision. "I'm proposing that we create formal legacy streams within the royal family's work. You will become the formal guardian of Diana's legacy, responsible for continuing and expanding the work she began. This won't be a symbolic role. It will be a substantive position with resources, staff, and the authority to develop new initiatives." Camilla looked at the chart and saw her own areas of focus clearly delineated: literacy, domestic violence, animal welfare, and supporting military families. These were causes she had developed expertise in over many years, and the chart showed how her work would complement rather than compete with other royal initiatives. "And, Camilla," Charles continued, "your role will be formally recognized as the Queen Consort's unique contribution to the monarchy. We're not reducing your responsibilities, we're clarifying and enhancing them. You'll have your own staff, your own initiatives, and the resources to make an even greater impact in the areas where you've already proven your effectiveness." The proposal was stunning in its ambition and creativity. Instead of asking anyone to sacrifice their role, Charles was suggesting a complete restructuring that would make everyone's contributions more effective and more clearly defined. It was a solution that addressed William's concerns about honoring his mother's memory while also validating Camilla's years of service and dedication. "But how would this work practically?" William asked, his legal mind immediately focusing on the implementation details. "How do we explain this restructuring to the public without making it seem like the family was divided?" Charles had anticipated this question and had spent considerable time developing the answer. "We present it as a natural evolution of the monarchy's approach to public service. As the royal family has grown, and as societal needs have become more complex, it makes sense to have specialized areas of focus that allow each member to develop deep expertise and make maximum impact." Camilla was studying the chart intently, seeing how the proposed structure would actually strengthen her position rather than diminish it. "Charles, this is remarkable, but it's also a massive undertaking. The coordination required, the staff changes, the public communications, it would be like reorganizing the entire royal household." "Yes, it would," Charles acknowledged. "But I believe it's necessary. The monarchy needs to evolve to remain relevant and effective. This restructuring would make us more efficient, more focused, and more responsive to the needs of the people we serve." William was beginning to see how the proposal addressed his deepest concerns while also creating opportunities he hadn't even considered. The Diana legacy stream. How would that work specifically? Charles turned to a second chart that showed the organizational structure in more detail. "You would head a formal office within the royal household, with dedicated staff and budget. You'd work with existing charities and organizations that were important to your mother, but you'd also have the authority to create new initiatives and partnerships. Think of it as taking everything Diana started and giving it the institutional support and continuity it deserves." The idea was powerful because it transformed William's concerns from obstacles into opportunities. Instead of feeling that his mother's legacy was being overshadowed, he would become its primary guardian and advocate, with the resources and authority to ensure its continued growth and impact. "And the public reaction?" Camilla asked. "How do we present this without suggesting that there were problems that needed to be solved?" Charles had spent considerable time developing the public communication strategy with his press secretary and senior advisors. "We present it as a proactive evolution, not a reactive solution. The monarchy is adapting to better serve the people in an increasingly complex world. Each member of the royal family is taking on specialized roles that allow for deeper expertise and greater impact. The conversation continued for over 3 hours, with Charles providing detailed explanations for every aspect of his proposal. He had consulted with constitutional experts, communication specialists, and senior royal household staff to ensure that the restructuring would be both legally sound and practically implementable. "I need you both to understand," Charles said as the meeting was drawing to a close, "that this proposal represents my vision for the future of the monarchy. It's not just about solving our current family dynamics. It's about creating a structure that will serve us well for decades to come." William felt a sense of excitement that surprised him. The proposal offered him the opportunity to honor his mother's memory in a meaningful way while also allowing him to develop his own areas of expertise and impact. "Father, this could actually make our work more effective, not just resolve our family concerns." Camilla nodded in agreement. "And it provides clarity about roles and responsibilities that could help both the public and the media understand what each of us contributes to the monarchy." But Charles wasn't finished with his surprises. He moved to a third chart that showed the international implications of the restructuring. "This new framework will also enhance our diplomatic and international development work. Each of you will have the opportunity to represent the monarchy in your areas of expertise on the global stage." The scope of the proposal was breathtaking. Charles was envisioning a complete transformation of how the royal family operated, with implications that extended far beyond their internal family dynamics. It was a vision that could strengthen the monarchy's relevance and effectiveness for generations to come. "I want both of you to take time to consider this proposal carefully," Charles said. "If we move forward, it will require total commitment from all of us. There will be challenges and complications, and we'll need to work together more closely than ever before." William looked at Camilla with a new sense of partnership rather than competition. "If we do this, we'd essentially be creating a new model for how royal families operate." "Yes," Charles said simply. "That's exactly what we'd be doing." As the meeting concluded, both William and Camilla felt that they had been part of something historic. The conversation had begun with family tensions and concerns, but it had evolved into something much larger, a vision for transforming the monarchy itself. Charles had taken their personal struggles and used them as a catalyst for institutional innovation. Instead of seeing William's concerns as problems to be solved, he had seen them as opportunities for positive change. Instead of asking Camilla to step back, he had found a way to step forward together. "When would we announce this?" William asked as they prepared to leave. Charles smiled, knowing that the timeline was perhaps the most surprising element of his entire proposal. "I'm planning to announce it next month, during the state opening of Parliament. This restructuring will be part of my legislative agenda, presented as a modernization of royal institutions to better serve the people." The audacity of the plan was stunning. Charles was not just solving a family problem. He was using it as an opportunity to make historic changes to the monarchy itself. The announcement would capture global attention and position the British royal family as leaders in institutional innovation. As William and Camilla left the palace that day, both of them understood that they had been part of a conversation that would be remembered in royal history. Charles had taken a moment of family crisis and transformed it into an opportunity for unprecedented positive change. The decision would require courage, coordination, and commitment from all of them. But it also offered the possibility of creating something truly remarkable, a royal family structure that honored the past while boldly embracing the future. Charles spent that evening alone in his study, reflecting on the day's conversation and the momentous decision he had made. He had chosen not to manage the conflict between his son and his wife, but to transcend it entirely. His solution would require everything he had learned about leadership, diplomacy, and family dynamics over his decades of preparation for the throne. The next phase would involve months of careful planning, staff coordination, and public preparation. But Charles felt confident that he had found not just a solution to their immediate challenges, but a path toward a stronger and more effective monarchy for the future. His next move would indeed shock everyone, but perhaps not in the way they expected. The month leading up to the state opening of Parliament was unlike anything the royal household had ever experienced. Charles's proposal had set in motion a massive behind-the-scenes effort involving constitutional lawyers, communications experts, government officials, and senior royal staff. The scale of the restructuring required careful coordination with multiple government departments, and extensive preparation for the inevitable public and media reaction. Sir Edward Whitman found himself at the center of this unprecedented effort, working 18-hour days to ensure that every aspect of the announcement was properly prepared. "Your Majesty," he told Charles during one of their daily briefings, "I've been in royal service for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what we're attempting to accomplish." Charles appreciated his private secretary's dedication while also understanding the magnitude of what they were undertaking. "Sir Edward, we're not just making an announcement. We're fundamentally changing how the monarchy operates. It requires this level of attention to detail." The legal aspects alone were staggering in their complexity. The creation of formal legacy streams within the royal household required new constitutional frameworks, revised protocols, and careful consideration of precedent and procedure. Each element needed to be thoroughly researched and properly documented to ensure the changes would be legally sound and institutionally sustainable. Meanwhile, William threw himself into preparing for his new role with an intensity that surprised even those closest to him. He spent hours meeting with representatives from charities and organizations that had been important to his mother, learning about their current challenges and future needs. The prospect of becoming the formal guardian of Diana's legacy had awakened a passion for service that went beyond his previous royal duties. Catherine watched her husband's transformation with admiration and concern. "You're working yourself to exhaustion," she told him one evening as he reviewed documents related to homelessness initiatives. "This is important work, but you need to pace yourself." William looked up from the papers spread across their dining room table. "Catherine, this is the first time I've felt truly excited about my royal role. For years, I've been fulfilling obligations and following protocols. But this feels like I'm actually going to make a difference in areas that matter deeply to me." His enthusiasm was infectious, but it also reflected the weight of responsibility he felt to honor his mother's memory properly. The formal structure that Charles was creating gave him the authority and resources to expand Diana's work in ways that had never been possible before. Camilla's preparation was equally intensive, but carried a different emotional weight. She was essentially being asked to formalize and expand work that she had been doing quietly for years, but she was also aware that the success of the entire restructuring depended partly on public acceptance of her enhanced role. Lady Margaret Thornberry helped coordinate Camilla's preparation, working with communications specialists to develop materials that would clearly explain her areas of focus and expertise. "Ma'am, the public needs to understand that this isn't about competing with Diana's legacy, but about complementing it with your own unique contributions." Camilla nodded, understanding the delicate balance required. "Margaret, I want people to see that this restructuring makes all of our work more effective. William will be able to do justice to his mother's legacy, and I'll be able to focus on areas where I can make my greatest contribution." The coordination between William and Camilla during this preparation period marked a complete transformation in their relationship. Instead of careful politeness masking underlying tension, they began working together as partners in a shared mission. Their planning meetings became collaborative sessions where they identified opportunities for coordination and mutual support. Your literacy initiatives could connect beautifully with some of the youth programs in the Diana legacy stream, William observed during one of their planning sessions. "Many of the young people we work with struggle with reading and education issues." Camilla was pleased by his suggestion and his willingness to find areas of collaboration. "And your mental health work complements my domestic violence initiatives. Women leaving abusive situations often need psychological support as well as practical assistance." Charles observed these interactions with deep satisfaction, seeing that his restructuring was achieving something beyond his most optimistic expectations. Not only were they solving the original family tensions, but they were creating genuine partnerships that would make their collective work more effective. The government's reaction to Charles's proposal required careful diplomatic handling. Prime Minister's office needed to be briefed on the constitutional implications, while various departments needed to understand how the restructuring would affect their interactions with the royal household. The changes were significant enough to require parliamentary awareness, though not formal approval. Lord Chancellor Sir Geoffrey Morrison met privately with Charles to discuss the legal and constitutional aspects of the announcement. "Your Majesty, what you're proposing is innovative and potentially very positive, but we need to ensure that all constitutional requirements are properly addressed." Charles had anticipated these concerns and had worked with his constitutional advisors to ensure complete compliance with existing frameworks. "Lord Chancellor, We've been very careful to work within established constitutional boundaries while finding new ways to organize royal responsibilities. The substance of what we're doing isn't changing. We're simply creating more effective structures for carrying out our traditional duties. The media preparation was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the entire effort. The announcement needed to be presented in a way that emphasized positive innovation rather than reactive problem-solving. Communications teams worked around the clock to develop materials that would help journalists and the public understand the vision behind the restructuring. Sarah Pembroke, the Royal Communications Director, coordinated with multiple teams to ensure consistent messaging across all platforms. We need to present this as a natural evolution of the monarchy's approach to public service, she explained to her staff. The focus should be on enhanced effectiveness and clearer specialization, not on resolving family tensions. 3 days before the state opening of Parliament, Charles held a final family meeting to ensure everyone was completely prepared for the announcement and its aftermath. The meeting included not just William and Camilla, but also Catherine and the senior staff who would be responsible for implementing the new structure. In 3 days, we'll be making history, Charles began. But the announcement is only the beginning. The success of this restructuring will depend on how well we implement it and how effectively we serve the people through our new roles. William felt a sense of nervous excitement that reminded him of his wedding day, a mixture of anticipation and awareness of the life-changing nature of what was about to happen. Father, I want you to know that I'm completely committed to making this work. What you've created is far beyond anything I had imagined when we first started these conversations. Camilla nodded in agreement. Charles, this restructuring gives all of us the opportunity to serve more effectively than we ever could have individually. I'm honored to be part of this innovation. The final preparations included extensive rehearsals for the announcement ceremony and careful coordination with government officials who would be present. Charles would be delivering one of the most significant speeches of his reign, introducing changes that would reshape the monarchy for generations to come. On the morning of the state opening of Parliament, Charles felt a calm confidence that surprised him. He had spent months preparing for this moment, but he also understood that he was about to embark on an unprecedented experiment in royal leadership. The speech he would deliver had been carefully crafted to explain not just what was changing, but why these changes would benefit the people they served. As the royal family made their way to the House of Lords, crowds gathered along the route showed the usual enthusiasm for royal occasions, unaware that they were about to witness a historic transformation. The traditional pageantry of the ceremony provided a striking contrast to the innovative content of Charles's announcement. When Charles stood to deliver his speech, the chamber was filled with politicians, dignitaries, and media representatives who expected a traditional ceremonial address. Instead, they heard a king articulating a bold vision for the future of the monarchy. My lords and members of the House of Commons, Charles began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Today I announce a significant evolution in how the royal family will serve the people of this nation and the Commonwealth. He explained the restructuring with clarity and conviction, describing how the new framework would allow for deeper expertise, more focused impact, and better coordination of royal charitable and public service work. He spoke about the Diana legacy stream not as a reaction to family tensions, but as a natural evolution that would ensure the continued growth of important humanitarian work. The Princess of Wales began work that touched millions of lives, Charles said, his voice carrying both respect and determination. Today we ensure that this work continues to grow and flourish under dedicated leadership with the resources and authority to expand its impact for generations to come. When he described Camilla's formalized role and areas of focus, he spoke with pride about her years of dedication and expertise. The Queen Consort has developed deep knowledge and genuine partnerships in areas of critical social need. This restructuring allows her to build upon that foundation with enhanced resources and clear mandate for continued service. The reaction in the chamber was immediate and electric. Members of Parliament recognized that they were witnessing something unprecedented, a ruling monarch voluntarily restructuring the monarchy to enhance its effectiveness and relevance. The innovation was breathtaking in its scope and vision. William watched from the royal gallery as his father delivered the speech, feeling a profound sense of pride and anticipation. The announcement was transforming his private concerns into public opportunities for service, and he could already envision the positive impact the new structure would have. When Charles concluded his speech, The response was unlike anything seen at a state opening of Parliament in modern memory. The applause was not just polite ceremonial acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation for bold leadership and innovative thinking. In the days that followed, the media reaction exceeded even the most optimistic expectations of the royal communications team. Headlines around the world praised the restructuring as visionary leadership that demonstrated the monarchy's continued relevance and adaptability. Editorial writers described it as a masterclass in institutional innovation and family leadership. The public response was equally positive, with polls showing strong support for the changes and appreciation for the clearer definition of royal roles. People could now understand exactly how each member of the royal family was contributing to society, and the areas of focus resonated with issues that mattered to them. William's first major event as head of the Diana legacy stream drew unprecedented crowds and media attention. Standing where his mother had once stood, speaking about causes she had championed, he felt her presence and her approval in a way that brought him both comfort and determination. "My mother believed that everyone deserves compassion, dignity, and hope," he said to the crowd gathered at a homeless shelter that had been one of Diana's favorite charities. "Today we begin a new chapter in continuing her work, with the resources and commitment to expand her vision and reach people who continue to need our support." Camilla's first event in her formalized role was equally powerful, demonstrating how the restructuring had actually enhanced rather than diminished her impact. Speaking at a literacy conference, she outlined ambitious new initiatives that would address reading difficulties across multiple age groups and social situations. "Literacy is not just about reading words on a page," she told the audience of educators and advocates. "It's about giving people the tools to understand their world, advocate for themselves, and build better futures for their families. With enhanced resources and clear focus, we can make a real difference in addressing this fundamental need." Charles watched these early events with deep satisfaction, knowing that his bold decision had created something remarkable. The family tensions that had once threatened their unity had been transformed into a source of strength and innovation. The monarchy had not just survived a crisis, it had used that crisis as a catalyst for unprecedented positive change. The restructuring that had begun with William's honest expression of concerns had become a model for institutional leadership and family cooperation. Charles's decision to transform conflict into opportunity had created something that none of them could have imagined individually: a royal family structure that was stronger, more effective, and more clearly focused on serving others. As the first year of the new structure progressed, the results spoke for themselves. The Diana legacy stream expanded its reach and impact in ways that honored the past while boldly embracing future possibilities. Camilla's work gained new recognition and effectiveness through her formalized role and enhanced resources. Most importantly, the royal family had found a way to serve the people more effectively while maintaining their unity and mutual respect. Charles's next move had indeed shocked everyone, not through conflict or controversy, but through visionary leadership that transformed a family crisis into an institutional triumph. The king had proven that sometimes the most powerful response to tension is not management or compromise, but transformation and transcendence.